was the sound of a f***ing divorce!
So a year passed. That's really fun to think about. Some of you might be also noticing a pattern here. Around a year ago, I took my own detour into hell and uploaded a video titled The Fatal Flaws of Helluva Boss, a video where I dived into every episode from the pilot to episode 5, as that was the latest one out at the time. If anyone needs any confirmation before we begin, I really like Helluva Boss, Hazbin Hotel, and a majority of Ivsy Pop's work, and that video wasn't made to hate on it or throw half-baked critiques for the fun of it. Although yes, there's plenty of stuff I would have refined if I had made the video now, like everything involving the demon royalty immunity plot hole that I thought was a thing, that was wrong, that was a goof. Well, I still like the show overall. My main conclusions, if memory serves correct, was that the show felt disjointed when it tried to go for the story-driven approach, despite how great many of the episodes were, when originally it seemed more appealing than Hazbin Hotel because it wasn't plot-focused, and was often paced better and more tightly written due to having only around 10 minutes to work with, and that given it wouldn't have many episodes as an indie-produced series, it would inevitably fall short in delivering satisfying story payoffs. Now that's not a completely certain statement, but merely judging by how many episodes we were going to get and how the story was going to progress, it felt like a justified concern to have at the time. This video is when I was still in a bit of a transition phase for my content, going from roasting my nutsack on open fire to balanced critique, so it's easy for me to look back on it and the mistakes I made in my analysis due to my reliance on hyperbole. Sorry to begin this video with an argument so head-scratchingly debatable given the show's current state, but I figured it's worth establishing where I was coming from before hopping into episode 6 and the rest of the show from that point on. Because while I still have my issues with the show, Helluva Boss from episode 6 all the way into the beginning of season 2 has legitimately managed to blow me away with each episode. It's a show that finally feels aware of its finite amount of time, and instead of dragging its story out amid the episodic stuff, it's gone full force with its character development, bombastic action scenes, and genuinely touching moments. It's not a balanced show, it's not even remotely close to perfect. You might even consider calling it incredible to be a stretch, but given the context of this being a web series, I think it deserves the monumental amount of hype it has garnered, and the praise is not unwarranted in the slightest. This is an adult show that actually feels like an adult show now. One of the main things people dug into Hazbin and Helluva Boss for was its over-reliance on sex jokes and raunchiness, which at best felt shoehorned and at worst just outright desperate for a laugh, and it's a big contributing factor for many people's hatred of Ivsy's writing and why Hazbin specifically was so polarizing when it blew up. Now instead of sex being restricted to it actually fully explores a nuanced sexual relationship between Blitz and Stolas that's written with genuine care and complexity, highlighting both of their personal qualms for this forbidden love, and helping their interactions feel authentic amid a storm of personal trauma and insecurities. Blitz and Stolas' characters seem to now be the driving force of the show after Millie and Moxie's arcs were done. While I mean, calling whatever Millie had an arc is more of a stretch than calling the show incredible, but that's besides the point, and I believe the show greatly benefits from shifting its focus to that. Blitz has been thoroughly studied as a character at this point, and later episodes recontextualized everything we saw from him previously, keeping the people he loves at arm's length while being incredibly clingy and afraid of being alone. A raging asshole who's drowning in deep-rooted insecurities. Well, slow down, Vivzy, I don't think my subscribers can keep up. With Stolas acting as a higher class mirror to Blitz, who receives an overabundance of power and respect from society at large but feels trapped by it. In stark contrast to Blitz desiring respect and power due to his status as a second-class citizen of hell. On top of this, the animation remains as stunning as always, and I can only imagine what Hazbin is going to look like when it's released from A24 prison. Each musical number feels a lot less forced and they're all beautifully executed. I want to get into the nitty-gritty of this show as it's genuinely one of the few shows I've seen recently that has consistently refused to let me down. Here I thought my life would devolve into a bundle of miserable questions when I turned 18, yet here we are. Well, so let's first discuss some general stuff that bears mentioning.
You singing love songs in my lustful lounge.
Ozzy's ain't the place for sentimental sound.
I originally made my first Helluva Boss video with the intention of following it up a few months later when season 1 was finished, to reflect on the show and hopefully come to a different conclusion, especially after episode 6 came out a month after my video and fixed a lot of my issues. So I decided to sit back, relax, and just kept I would have really loved to talk about more episodes in this video, but Helluva Boss has had a pretty troubled production, from episodes taking much longer than anticipated to release, to the copyright Yakuza preventing a finished product from being released because god record labels suck. Since a lot of Ivsy's audience likely don't follow her Twitter, we only got the first episode of season 2 because the final episode of season 1 is in limbo and currently being beaten to death by Ryuji Goda at the Sony headquarters, and it's not as simple as removing the song, as it seems to be integral to the episode and has already had scenes animated around it. So until a compromise is found, you won't be seeing any Helluva Boss episode episodes for a while, as the first episode of season 2 was released specifically because it didn't majorly affect the plot or spoil the ending of episode 8, being a flashback episode and all. Felt I should get that out of the way first, since I know plenty of people are still confused about it, and it also makes me appreciate just how great the show has been in spite of all the production troubles. Then there's the other thing that we need to talk about, and that's Stolitz discourse. Stolitz is a complicated thing to talk about because it feels real. Relationships like this, where both parties can't express their true feelings properly and suffer from contrast and complexes, are messy, awkward, and in Stolitz's case, downright unhealthy. But we're shown that the two do genuinely love and care for each other. It's not one-sided love, but they don't see it like that. The main issue people have is the power dynamic, with Stolitz at several points organizing fuck sessions just so that Blitz can keep doing his job, with him often reluctantly agreeing to doing it while looking uncomfortable. The forest scene in episode 1 is a good example of Stolitz being plain manipulative, using Blitz's stressful predicament to his advantage to arrange a night with him. The thing is, Stolitz is shown to actually care for Blitz. Nothing about the relationship is inherently one-sided, and Stolitz doesn't know how to phrase his feelings correctly. He's clearly into the fact that he's in a relationship with a lower-class citizen while being a powerful member of royalty. Like, he's definitely into that, and it's reflected in many of his comments towards Blitz as he patronizes him and calls him cute when he gets serious. But through the clear fetishization of their predicament, he has something with Blitz that he hasn't really felt before: genuine love. The ending of episode 6 is a testament to this, where he goes out of his way to rescue Blitz. Stolitz has trouble with making the relationship more grounded and slightly less physical, and this all reaches a boiling point in episode 7, where all of Blitz's doubts about their relationship are confirmed in his mind when Stolitz looks ashamed at the public now knowing of their love and doesn't defend himself. I'm not saying the ship isn't problematic, it's just that it's meant to be problematic and messy. It's a complicated dynamic built upon communication issues and personal trauma, and that's what makes Stolitz so compelling. We'll be talking more about Stolitz in this video, but for now it's best to recognize that it's messy intentionally and that they're trying to show it evolving from a transactional thing into a real love that they both have for each other, leading into a much healthier relationship. I bring all this up because Stolitz and Blitz are now the heart and soul of the show, especially over the next 3 episodes, and I see a lot of people who are justifiably disgusted and against the relationship for obvious reasons. But if there's one thing Vivienna's proved with this series, is that she's really good at creating complex and nuanced relationships involving a toxic dynamic and people with toxic issues and flipping it on its head into something far more compelling and comfortable. I think I'm about done for this section, so let's get into the episodes.
What you expect from a proprietor like us?
Your demon host, Osmodeus, the embodiment of love.
So right off the bat, this episode confirms that simping for Millie is never going to stop, and it also shows just how in love the show is with spinny shots.
I'm having so much fun!
But it's also the first episode that really focuses on Blitz and Moxie's partnership. People on Earth are finally starting to notice IMP's actions, especially since they go up without disguises, something I would criticize, but honestly... And the events of the episode lay the groundwork for something big that will most likely come up in season 2, and it creates a lot of interesting paths for the story to take. What will happen when the world finally sees the physical proof of demons in the human world? What will Hell's reaction be to IMP's actions? It's an episode where a lot of the ending's weight is carried by possible thoughts, but there actually seems to be a clear plan here. It makes me happy to finally start seeing multiple shows with storylines that are laid out in advance instead of being soulless hype generators for suckers. This was the episode that made me realize Helluva Boss was starting to tap into its untapped potential, and every episode since this one has been even more ambitious. For that reason alone, I give points to HB that I haven't given to many shows, even ones that I like. Ambition. Especially ambition that's satisfyingly followed up, and executed well. I'll be discussing where the show could go after I've taken a look at the episodes, but for now it's important to appreciate just how much this one ending sets up. As said, a lot of this episode focuses on Blitz and Moxie. At the beginning of the interrogation, we see a dickish side of Moxie that we haven't seen before as he works with Blitz to completely annoy the shit out of the Asians, making for the single most entertaining scene in the entire show thus far, letting us know that they share a mutual respect for one another despite the constant arguing and insults we've seen in previous episodes. While I would have liked to have seen more Blitz and Moxie stuff beforehand, as this feels a little out of nowhere for Moxie to be a master in the art of being a prick, it's still nice to see them genuinely getting along in dire circumstances and sets us up for one hell of an episode.
Give me that.
First of all, the visuals throughout the episode from Blitz and Moxie's acid trips respectively, as well as the ending fight scene, are absolutely incredible. I keep forgetting this is an indie series because these scenes are so out there in terms of visual style and creativity. The Disney Dream sequence with Moxie specifically is stupidly smooth and expressive, and I absolutely loved it. Contrasted with the grungy soundtrack and dirty black and white visuals of Blitz's dream sequence, it shows the utter state of disarray Blitz's mind is in. Both sequences complete with their own visions of themselves. Moxie's version of Blitz is not really anything interesting, but Blitz's version of Moxie definitely is. Chewing Blitz out, letting him know that when Moxie screws screws up, it's often because of Blitz's poor communication and how it only reflects on Blitz, not Moxie, which explains part of why Blitz gets on Moxie's case a lot throughout the series for minor issues. It's a constant state of projection. Side note, I like the detail of Moxie being a crudely drawn illustration here as a possible callback to episode 3 where Moxie criticizes art skills. Moxie definitely has a simpler arc, but it is by no means underwritten. Understanding that he has to be more honest about the pain that Blitz's relentless piss-taking causes for him, whereas Blitz's arc is far more complex. It deals with so much relating to how Blitz handles relationships and fear of proper intimacy, choosing to keep his friends and the people he forms romantic connections with at arm's length so that he's able to have them in his life but doesn't get so close to them where it hurts where they leave him, and will often be the one to break things off himself if he feels they're planning on doing so. The visions of Striker, Fizzarali, and Verosica all confirm this, ending with him running up the staircase towards Stolas, literally running from his problems to be with Stolas. But he's chained up and uncomfortable. We know that he has doubts about his relationship with Stolas and feels that their relationship is just based on personal benefit for them both, despite the two sharing real romantic attraction to one another. But there's a number of ways to interpret this moment, like how he may see his relationship with Stolas as a place where he can hide, yet he feels trapped. They've never talked properly before about their problems or really anything face to face, and he's definitely scared of losing Stolas too. I'm writing this section incredibly sloppily and I apologize, but dream sequences are always hard to write around for me due to them always being stuffed with symbolism and so many possible interpretations. Anyway, episode 6 is really great. It shows a lot of the show's strengths when it comes to character development, and the absolutely spectacular visuals helped its effectiveness by an indescribable amount. This was the episode that proved to me how the series was in fact an adult show, not just a cartoon with mature themes and immature usage of swearing and sexual innuendos. That it could write complex and compelling characters based on the archetypes we've seen plenty of before, and how it can handle the topic of sex and sexual relationships in a nuanced way, which is something so bafflingly rare for adult shows, especially adult animation.
You wanna hang around this lustful town? Ditch the lovey-dovey before we knock you around.
This episode automatically gets an A+ for including the Fizzarali trumpet solo.
Give me a thrust. You show me some love. From the groin to the bust, in desire we trust, in the house of Osmodia.
Trumpet!
Every cartoon is now worse because I don't have this. I think this might just be a masterclass of piling on. So much of Blitz's past comes pouring out. Hell's reaction to Moxie and Millie's healthy relationship is intriguing. Everything was Stolas. Episode 7 is an all-out assault of drama, and if you love that sort of stuff, then you most likely adored this episode as much as I did. There's no mind-melting action scene, there's not much comedy, but it's incredibly tight. Brandon Rogers absolutely killed it in this episode as Blitz. He's always been fantastic at portraying Blitz as this likable asshole, but over the past few episodes we've gotten a far softer side of him, and now here he's practically conducting the train of emotional damage, and getting us to really feel how much the events of this night destroy Blitz and how his conversation with Stolas just adds insult to injury as he goes back into his old defense mechanism of pushing people away before they get the chance. Seeing Stolas' reaction to Hell finding out about their relationship is biased confirmation that he only used them for sex and nothing more, when in reality they're both incredibly troubled people who care deeply about how others think of them. Two incredibly insecure people colliding at the absolute worst possible moment. It's fantastic. You can hear Blitz's tears being held back when he's dropping off Stolas. It's an absolutely fantastic performance, and I don't think Rogers gets enough credit for his voice acting. On the Stolas side of things, he's at the lowest point of his life with his wife leaving him alone in the big empty house, contemplating if his relationship with Blitz was really the right decision for him to make if he was going to lose everything he had. It's why he's absolutely ecstatic about Blitz calling him up to go to Aussie's. He needs confirmation that what they have is special, that it was all worth it, and seeing his reaction to Blitz ignoring him and spying on Millie and Moxie the entire night is devastating. What's also interesting is the face Blitz make when Veronica has him cornered, devolving as she gets close into a face that really spells out how much he realizes he's hurt her, and how much he regrets it. There's a ton of details about Blitz's past here, nothing truly concrete, but enough food for thought. All of the photos in his house of his face torn out of them, all of his photos with Fizz when they were kids, Millie and Moxie, him adopting Luna, and stumbling onto a photo of his mother and sister. Many have pointed out that the necklace Blitz wears throughout the series is the same one his mother is wearing in this photo, and seeing that this photo causes Blitz to cry for the first time in the series really puts a lot into perspective. Not even after the dream sequence in episode 6 did he shed a tear, yet here he breaks down upon looking at it for a few seconds. Something definitely happened here, whether his mom passed away or whatever, but it's a brilliant scene and the most powerful ending the show has had so far. Outside of the passengers of this evening's therapy train, we have Millie and Moxie, who truly came out of this episode with a win. Now surprise surprise, a wholesome relationship in Hell, sort of a problem. We finally get to see what the rest of Hell outside the Wrath Ring feels about this. Millie and Moxie are in a healthy, loving, and wholesome relationship, which is precisely why it must be destroyed, especially when Moxie plays a wholesome love song at a place owned by Asmodeus, the king of lust, a ruler of hell, you big bitch. Even through all of the heckling, they have each other and couldn't care less what anyone thinks of their love, and they end their song in stark contrast to the state Blitz and Stolas are in. I mean, hell, the only reason Blitz is here is to spy on Millie and Moxie, because he's simply fascinated by their relationship, how two beings from hell could get together like this and have such a simple, loving, and healthy love for each other. As previously stated, he craves proper intimacy, so while it's easy to make fun of him or find his stalking a little weird, he does ultimately love them both and desperately wants what they have with, well, anyone. All of his relationships have either been toxic or ended badly. There's so much interesting character depth when it comes to Blitz and Stolas, and I hope Season 2 really delves deep into all of this later on. As expected, the animation and artwork are great, but I honestly think this is the best looking episode of the show, period. Despite many standout moments in previous episodes, there's always been parts of the show where corners are cut on the animation when it comes to frame rates or some janky movements. Usually they save the budget for the action sequences, which all look great, and I admire how ambitious this show is with its animation, especially with how it still tries to show the scenes and movements they cut back on in conjunction with the wild and bombastic scenes they poured the most money into. Episode 7 on the other hand just looks fantastic all around. No corners are cut, no scene is placed above another in terms of priority, the character models are consistent, the animation frame rate is consistent, the backgrounds are gorgeous, the lighting is stellar, just a visual feast of an episode. And this show's music, man, my god.
Give me a thrust. Show me some lust. From the groin to the bust. Little imp, you just must. In the house of Asmodeus. Come on, sing us a song.
Asmodeus and Fizzarelli's song is without a doubt my favourite song from any Vivzy Pop production. This is an absolute fucking jam. James Monroe Iglehart has such an amazing voice, full of warmth and passion and absolutely perfect for Asmodeus. The jazzy feel of the song just sweeps me off my goddamn feet, and the immaturity of the lyrics feels natural and perfect here. It's a song about lust, it's going to be sexual in nature, but I did not expect it to sound so damn good. Granted, every song from Hazbin and Helluva Boss has been fantastic, but this was just amazing episode.
So give me a thrust. Show me some love.
Here we are at the latest episode of the series, skipping right past the finale of Season 1 due to copyright bollocks, but honestly this could have been the Season 1 finale and I wouldn't have minded it. End Season 1 on a cliffhanger like this. It works as a follow-up to Season 1 since it's mostly a flashback episode until the end, where we see the aftermath of Stolas' night out with Blitz. Oh yeah, this is Stolas' episode by the way, and I personally could not be happier for him.
What the fuck was that, Stolas?
That was the sound of a fucking divorce!
Absolute icon. Now this episode has been mostly well received, but what was surprising to me is how many people seem to think that this episode ruins Stolas as a character, or somehow changes how Stella was written. I absolutely disagree with these takes. Stolas was not ruined in this episode, if anything he was made even better. Okay, so this is a really weird comparison, but I'm about to start talking about Metal Gear. Sorry. This reminds me a lot of Metal Gear Rising's take on Raiden after Metal Gear Solid 4 actually. Yeah, weird comparison I know, but a lot of this discourse really reminded me of that. Whereas something Metal Gear Solid 4 was a perfect bookend for Raiden's character, to many of us it felt unnatural and combined with how plain monstrous Rose's actions were in that game when you remove the emotional layer of the scene and consider the context of the entire game and her entire plan, the final cutscene with Raiden feels a lot more bitter. So instead, Rising changed this up to allow Raiden to finally come to terms with who he is and to embrace his Jack the Ripper persona, using it to fight for his own ideals. Obviously, Metal Gear handles very different subject matter and characters compared to Helluva Boss, but a lot of this discourse gave me some serious deja vu because I really think Season 2 enhances Stolas rather than ruins him. Stolas was not ruined, rather he was finally wising up and realizing Blitz was mostly using their relationship as a means to obtain his grimoire, while also not realizing that Blitz also felt he was in an empty relationship. Stolas was always desperate for affection without realizing Blitz was mostly using him, just like when they were kids. We know that Blitz feels shackled by Stolas and that Stolas wasn't able to pick up on that until it was too late. In fact, a lot of Stolas' lustful nature could be explained by his arranged marriage with a woman he hates and a woman who hates him back. Never having proper intimacy, and especially when he has to suppress his homosexuality, is definitely going to have an impact. So all of Stolas' weird and funny love talk in previous episodes is really just him being overwhelmed with emotion and lust, as seen when Blitz literally bites him in this scene and it causes him to go bright red.
Well, oh my fuck.
Was that the bite of 87?
Stolas and Blitz meeting as kids is also incredibly interesting and definitely explains how they have this relationship as adults. As we've seen throughout the series, there's a part of Stolas that's still a little bigoted towards imps, so if Blitz hadn't met Stolas during his childhood and became his first ever friend, I doubt the scene would have played out in the same way. Some also feel that the episode portrays Blitz and Stolas' relationship as healthy and wholesome for some reason, just because Stolas developed his crush on Blitz when they were kids. The entire point of the episode is Stolas realizing his relationship with Blitz was mostly one-sided, or at least that's how they both see it, unaware of their own romantic attraction, and his song reflects that. It's about him and Blitz, not him and his wife. And I mean, finally giving him the fucking chance to stand up to Stella after all of his experiences with toxic relationships is just too much of a powerful moment for me to really think the writers didn't know what they were doing. Nothing about this episode ruins Stolas for me, unless it makes him so much better and just a little more sympathetic, without throwing everything that's been built up out the window or even downplaying how unhealthy his love for Blitz was. He's not ruined, he's simply getting better. Then there's Stella, and this is some discourse which honestly surprised me because I thought it was clear from her first appearance, and especially after episode 5, that Stella is a ginormous bitch. Think back to the second episode.
You slept with an imp in our fucking bed! It wasn't expected. I didn't have time to go to a motel. A motel? Like a fucking plebeian?
Stella isn't upset that Stella slept with someone else. She couldn't care less. It's the status of who he slept with that really gets under her skin. An imp. A second-class citizen of hell. On top of this, Stolas literally cannot put into words why he decided to sleep with Blitz and why he doesn't love Stella. He can't even explain it in front of his daughter, which should have raised several red flags that there was a lot going on. And even if you didn't pick up on that, Stella literally fucking hired a hit on her husband in front of him at the dinner table in front of their daughter.
What an asshole!
Let's just say it hasn't been entirely subtle that behind the scenes, Stella was a manipulative, abusive, and controlling bitch. And to see that finally be validated and for some reason taking some people aback is honestly perplexing. Even theory channels correctly guessed that their marriage was arranged like a year ago, so I have no clue why this was even contentious. I actually applaud this episode for confirming that Stella's put up with everything his wife threw at him just so Octavia could live a normal life, unaware of how bad everything was. But then when Stella began constantly badmouthing Stolas in the wake of him sleeping with Blitz, her view of him began to become warped and they only mended their ties in episode 2 when they finally had a heart-to-heart. It's a really good story of an abusive partner trying to turn someone's kid against them, and I love that they handled it with such grace and respect. Discourse aside, the second half of the episode is definitely the strongest for me personally. The flashbacks of Blitz and Stolas as kids was very interesting, and I think we need to see more of Blitz's past due to how many deep-rooted issues he has. Not strictly his childhood. Stolas' father was voiced by the delightful Jonathan Freeman, who channels his inner Jafar by being a charming and irredeemable bastard that I really couldn't hate. And yes, they share the same voice actor.
Oh, that's an ugly noise, son. Here, how about you cease this bitch crying? That usually works. Would you like it if I took you to the circus in town?
Get a grip!
We officially have Richard Horvitz, Alex Brightman, James Eichelhart, Norman Reedus, and Jonathan Freeman in one show. I think I'm gonna pass out. I love that just with their adult relationships, Blitz initially uses Stolas to get what he wants, but eventually grows attached to him. I know that Blitz was mostly using his relationship to obtain the grimoire, but again, it's complicated because he craves genuine intimacy as well. And Stolas, blinded by his own lust, never realized that, leading to their love becoming seemingly one-sided for them. In fact, to interrupt this part of the script real quick, I just wanted to add some thoughts on this moment in the episode where Stolas seems to instigate their first sexual encounter, but is then suddenly taken aback when Blitz reciprocates. I interpreted this as Stolas being playful and not too serious, given he was incredibly wasted at the time, and that Blitz played into this so he could get the book. I heard some people also using this scene as justification to call Stolas inconsistent, and it's like, no. The callback to the pilot was unexpected and made even better for Stolas' absolutely euphoric declaration of his divorce. Stolas' song was beautiful, if a little off-key and short, and the ending scene is just the cherry on top, with Bryce Pinkham eating up the entire argument scene with Stella. The animation was obviously fantastic too. If I had to offer some critiques for this episode, it would be the link for the kid flashbacks, and how they kind of banked on the cute factor, which yes, it's absolutely adorable, but it kind of drags at points. But honestly speaking, I love this episode and I will happily die on this hill. I think it's great and a very strong start to what looks to be an even more ambitious season. If you were put off by Stolas' characterization in this episode, I implore you to rewatch the series and then this episode again with the context of what I've just discussed in this section. You may just warm up to it. I won't be the last to come to this conclusion, but this video is kind of a mess, I think. And it's mostly because Helluva Boss is just a downright fascinating show for me to talk about, and I end up using these videos as places to put my ideas and analysis for the show down for further discussion. I just really like talking about it without much refinement, pining over how complex it's gotten and how much it's improved. I loved going back to previous episodes and realizing some of the things I thought were issues, like Stillness not needing a bodyguard the entire time, were intentional writing choices that I was just too dumb to pick up on. It's a show that's very easy to write off on the surface, although admittedly the first episode doesn't leave the best impression, but god, it just sneaks up on you with really good writing and character work. It's often immature, delightfully profane, dark, gratuitously gory, but it's such a layered show underneath all of the noise. And that's not to write everything else off as noise, because that's great too. The animation is constantly setting new high bars for independently produced shows, the music is outstanding, the action scenes are a joy to watch unfold, it's such a well-rounded show. I know that a few people might disagree with my take on Season 2 Episode 1, but really I welcome the discussion because it's fascinating just how different everyone has interpreted this show. I'm the kind of guy who wants to look at the author's intent first, and I definitely don't want to use the death of the author to accuse a series of something it did not intend to do. But there's a lot of symbolism and subtlety packed into this show, so to see that reach a boiling point where everything is far more in your face when it comes to the writer's intentions, I can understand that taking some people for a ride. Personally though, loved it, confirmed everything I gathered from analysing the dialogue in previous episodes. If there's some stuff I definitely want to see for Season 2, it's definitely following up on every antagonist that IMP managed to piss off, Striker and the Agent specifically. I don't know if they're in the unreleased finale of Season 1, but if they are, that's cool. But Season 2 is a really good place to breathe some life into these setups, and it could lead to a lot of wild episodes and consequences. The Agents having proof of the existence of demons is going to cause trouble for sure, and I believe the most interesting outcome for this would be Stillness being held accountable since it's his book that allowed IMP to exist in the first place, and him having to choose between Blitz or taking accountability. I think that'll be a very interesting dilemma, and it could potentially lead into Striker's second assassination attempt over a number of outcomes, really bringing both of these plot threads together and intensifying the drama by tenfold. There's also the Cherubs. Yeah, I didn't forget about them, only because I couldn't pretend they didn't exist in fear of sounding like a fucking maniac. Blitz's past though has a lot that can be explored, especially his current status with his sister, that we've seen pop up in photos from time to time. I'm struggling to figure out what they can do now with Millie and Moxie. Millie definitely needs an episode or two, but Moxie is sort of done with the arc he had for Season 1, and I'd be interested to see him tackle something new. One thing I also want to see is Blitz possibly softening up a little, maybe even trying to make amends to people like Verostica and Fizz when he's aired out his issues. That's not required, I think it'd be neat though. That's about it, I gotta wrap this up now. Helluva Boss is pretty good, I love it quite a lot, and no matter how long it takes for the next episode, I will be patiently waiting for more. Until then, Fizz Trumpet.
Trumpet!
My broken record never skips a beat. Same face another day. Same face another day. I won't try to fly, so don't convince me. Sometimes the picture isn't clear. That photograph's a reminder on the wall of a good year. Gotta get your story straight. Last call for consequence. I'm saying you talk a good game.